What's up, golf friends? This is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. I'm here, as always, with the super producer, Joseph K. How you doing, Joseph?
Hey, Jim. What's going on, man? I'm doing great. How are you?
Good. It's been a little frigid here in Texas. Just waiting for things to warm up a little bit. Hopefully, you get some loops here coming up pretty soon. But yeah, we've got an exciting episode. This is episode 37 with Lawrence Donegan. But we, as always, we wanted to start with the opening tee shot, brought to you by our friends at Strakaline. I literally, like in the last 5 minutes, just ordered a yardage book, and you can attest to that. Strack, I used the code DRIVEN, got 20% off. So yeah, we're big fans of Strack, and we appreciate their support. So this is the opening tee shot, and you have the honor, sir.
Yeah, we've got some cold weather indeed, Jim. And I don't know about you, but I've got March 16th circled on my calendar, I believe it is, for daylight saving time. So we'll be able to fast forward a little bit and get some more daylight and some warmer weather. But yeah, I'm excited about this year. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but the USGA just announced another national development program. So they have the 2025 U.S. Elite Amateur National Program. And we've got some familiar names on here and even some guests on the show. So you want to fill us in on what that's all about?
Yeah, it's a little bit shrouded in mystery, but I think this is the multi-year journey of the USGA's National Development Program. They launched the junior team last year. I think it was 8 boys and 10 girls. They added some new names this year. We'll talk about that, when we're done here. But then the new wrinkle is now they're folded in the amateur series as sort of like phase 2 of their journey. And I think they're going to have a young professional one, I think even starting next year. So it's really exciting to see how this evolves. So they've got 3 amateurs and 3 male amateurs and 6 female amateurs. And you mentioned Jackson Koivin, or you alluded to Jackson Koivin. He's one of the 3. And there's also Jacob Molesky, who's at Notre Dame, and Max Herendeen from my University of Illinois Fighting Illini. Reading between the lines here, I think it's pretty interesting because, like, Jackson Koivin, he just got his 18th PGA Tour U point, and I think you pointed out that he had made some comments that really made it seem like he's going to stick around in college for at least another year, I would assume. So I think this also would support that. Like if he had thoughts of going professional this summer, I don't think he'd be joining this amateur team. So to me, this is maybe a little bit of a inkling into the Walker Cup thinking. Jackson Koivin is probably a lock on that Walker Cup team. That would give him the 20 points he would need to get his PGA Tour accelerated card if he doesn't get it before then. So that's pretty neat. But even like Jacob wasn't on the Walker Cup practice squad a few months ago. So I think this gives a pretty interesting nod. And Max was on the practice squad, and I would assume that he is on the Walker Cup. So anyways, this is really cool. And then like the six women as well, like Anna Davis, Farrah O'Keefe, who's at University of Texas, Gianna Clement. Those are just some of the names there. So we'll see how this goes and how the program supports them. Like Chris Zambry, I've got to talk to him a couple times. Like he really is pouring into these young men and women, and he's got a lot to offer. So I think, we should be fans of just American golf, like seeing the development of these star players. And ultimately their goal is that, they have Ryder Cup success, President's Cup success, Solheim Cup success in years to come. So I think we'll be able to look back at this time period and look at the success they had. And I think Chris Zambry is going to deserve a ton of credit for that. It's pretty exciting. Yeah, so with my tee shot, we never really talked about TGL. So we're live streaming here right after the big vaunted Tiger versus Rory matchup. So I'm just interested in your thoughts around TGL. Do you find it to be a compelling watch? Have you been tuning in? What's your take there?
Yeah, I thought it's been an interesting kind of ride. The first few kind of revs of it, right? We're still kind of ironing out the kinks. We've seen some interesting numbers and results from the launch monitor. So I think when we get that figured out, we'll be off and running. If I know Tiger, like I know Tiger, he's not gonna overshoot a wedge shot 30 yards long again. So we'll get that figured out. But It's been something fun to watch, something different on a Monday or Tuesday night when you've got nothing else going on. And there's also a lot of money on the line. I don't know if you knew that, but these guys are playing for money and they're competing. So I was actually watching the episode where the Auburn team was there the other night, and I saw Nick Clinard, and I texted him and I was like, "How is it? What's it like live?" And he said it's actually very cool and a lot of fun. So yeah, there's no bad things that can come of extra golf and bonus golf, especially when Tiger and Rory are in it. So yeah, I'm all for it, and it's fun to watch.
My only take on it is a couple of things. Like one, it's nice to have on the TV, like just sort of in the background thing. I don't really think it's like the most compelling, like competitive thing. And I think they're maybe stuck in a little bit of limbo between wanting to be like a real competitive match, but then the players, they obviously want to win, but they're also, they're treating it like it's a little bit like it's like silly season, right? So they have to figure out like what they're going to be. I actually think they might be better served if they went further into sort of the silly golf realm, where the holes were even more fantastical, but it allowed the players to really showcase their skills. Like, here's a crazy shot that we're asking you to try that probably only the best players of the world could really pull off, and just see if they can actually pull it off. I think the other thing, they're trying to get these non-golf fans, these casual golf fans, into golf, and then hopefully the PGA Tour is betting that some of them will be real golf fans down the road. To me, I think maybe the misstep is they should have probably paired up like two pros with like a social media influencer and have that be the team each time, and that would allow probably to bring more casual fans, more of the YouTube golfer fans to watch, and then you find out, oh, I really like these players because he was paired up with my favorite YouTube guy or whatever the case may be. So we'll see how this thing evolves. I'm not dismissing it. I would say if you're like sitting down to watch the competition, probably after like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, it kind of loses its luster a little bit. But again, just having it on the background and, seeing Tiger hit shots, regardless of what the launch monitor says, is always entertaining. So,
Yeah.
So speaking of Rory, I don't know, like should the Ball Frogs be in panic mode? You've got the Jupe Links, they look terrible the first match, and they just pulled out this victory in the playoff chip off or whatever against the Boston team. And we saw Rory hit a couple snipes. And this dovetails very well into our angle of attack episode at the end of this episode 37. We talk about these wholesale swing changes that Rory made in the offseason with Andrew, and just this topic of making wholesale swing changes. So what was your thought on Andrew's take there?
Yeah, Rory's hitting it still 190 ball speed, so as long as he keeps cranking out those numbers, I think Rory's going to be just fine. So we'll see. He's got his TGL warm up in, and I think he's playing in Pebble Beach this week. So I don't know. We'll just see, right? Time will tell, and the ultimate measuring stick will be if he can, pull off another major. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, this is what, year 11 without a major. So we got a quick plug for Andrew. Andrew's got some thoughts on Rory's swing. Maybe Rory's listening, and if he needs to make not only a swing change, but also a swing instructor change, I think we know a guy.
I'm sure Andrew would love that.
So anyways, and that comes after our main interview with Lawrence Donegan. This is episode 37, and I actually have McKellar magazine issue number 8, which we talk about with Lawrence in this episode at length. And so McKellar magazine is this, just like, even look at the size of it. It's really the perfect golf companion, really well-written articles, top golf writers that both him and my friend Tom Dunn have put together over the last few years. And like I said, this is issue 8, which just came out. So if you go to McKellarmagazine.com, I would encourage folks to order this. It's the best $14 that you'll spend, even as a gift. It's just great golf writing. And then we talk a lot with Lawrence around WAGR, because the article he wrote was someone who's kind of near and dear to my heart, this guy Fred Solomon, who tried to take down the USGA and WAGR by building a competing rating system. So when you were listening to Lawrence, did you maybe sense the parallels between Fred and your good friend Jim?
I did, yes. Albeit two completely different approaches, I'd say. Some a little bit more polite than others, but yeah, Lawrence was great, and he's our first Scot that we've had on the podcast. So he's got a great background, and just you can see his passion for the game just pour out through his voice and just everything that he's done for the game. And he's got an elite amateur son that's making some splashes out there. So we've got a lot in common, and yeah, it was great.
Yeah, like all of these things are sort of coming together in this episode. We got WAGR, we got amateur golf, we've got Walker Cup. Lawrence just has a ton of energy, ton of great passion for the game. He's a true purist, and that shines through in this interview and also in the McKellar magazine. I just want people to check that out. So with that, this is episode 37 with Lawrence Donegan, and as always, appreciate the time, Joseph.
Thanks, Jim.
Lawrence Donegan, welcome to the Driven Golf Pod. How's it going?
Oh, great, Jim. Thanks for having me on. Really big fan of the podcast. I know I'm not buttering you up, and massive fan of your work. You're one of my, and long have been one of my favorite follows on Twitter. We might get into it, we might not, but I've long been a WAGR observer.
Hashtag WAGR files.
The WAGR Chronicles, I like to call it, and the work you've done on that has just been fantastic. And I detect, of course, long been a student of the governing bodies, the RNA and the USGA. They would never admit that you've influenced what they've been doing, but I think you have. So congratulations.
We've got their attention. We're fighting the good fight. And I will say the feeling is definitely mutual. So Lawrence Donegan, you co-host or host the McKellar podcast with Jeff Shackelford. Just really covering all things golf and the landscape of golf, which has been pretty fascinating over these last couple of years. And obviously, Jeff Shackelford's another great golf mind. You co-founded this McKellar magazine with one of my closest friends, Tom Dunn. So we'll get into that. I'd love to hear the backstory and origin story for that. But you guys call it a golf companion, and it's just like this really smart, just a great read. It comes out periodically. It's just something that is, even the size of it, I think everything is just very well thought out, very well done, and something that's just been lacking, I think, in the golf space. But we'll definitely get into all of that. You have a son who is a high-level amateur golfer in the Big Ten, and you have a very interesting background. I think your path in terms of how you navigated your son through junior and amateur golf, I think, is different for somebody who's living in the States. So you're from Scotland originally, and with international travel, and we could talk about the Walker Cup team. Like I think this conversation, I'm really excited to have it because I think it's just going to go in a number of different directions, and definitely there's a link with WAGR and your most recent issue, which is number 8, which just came out, right?
Yeah, that's right. I did. Actually, Jim, you went through you forgot my rock and roll career.
Yeah, Lloyd Cole, right?
Yeah, I played bass guitar in Lloyd Cole the Commotions, which a medium-sized band back in the day. Anyway, put that to one side. Nobody needs to hear about that. Yeah, the new issue out of McKellar is out this week. I've written a piece tangentially related to WAGR about Fred Solomon. Fred Solomon was the founder and sole I'm trying to think what the word, the only employee of the Scratch Players Amateur World Ranking, which I'm sure you know what that is, Jim. For those, and anybody, I imagine anybody who listens to your podcast would know what the Scratch Players was. It was I hesitate to say rival world ranking to WAGR. It was actually the first attempt to found an amateur world ranking back in 2007, and WAGR the RNA came in with WAGR shortly thereafter. I might have got the dates wrong there, but and then they became. It was a great fun for years. It's a great David and Goliath story, I mean, I can go into it maybe
Yeah,
later.
let's get into it, because I think Fred, I don't obviously didn't know. I knew of his rankings. I know that
Yeah.
they're very highly regarded. Like these high level amateur tournaments, they have exemption criterias and invitation criterias, and they'll look at WAGR, right? But in some cases, like there's anomalies with WAGR and the things don't line up. But I think they often use the scratch rankings as a companion, right?
Well, sadly, Fred died in April 2023. But yeah, for years it was. You go through. So let's go back to the start. Fred was a great amateur player. He was on the Cal golf team in the 74, 75. A good player, transferred up into Cal. Mathematical savant, a bit like yourself, Jim. I mean, really was a finance guy. Really, really, really smart. Obsessed with golf. Suddenly realized. I mean, he wasn't good enough to play the pros, but then he got into. He realized there wasn't a world for scratch players. There was the college game, and then there was a pro game, and there was nothing. There was obviously the USGA events, but there was nothing in that space, in the scratch players space. So Fred started a tournament called the Scratch Players, and he wanted to make it one of the best amateur events in the world. So he kind of tied it to the US Amateur. I think the first one was in 2000, and so the US Amateur would be, let's say it was at Olympic Club, or let's say it was at, I don't know, Skokie in Chicago. Fred would try and take the scratch players to a venue close by the week before, so he could get a good field.
Oh wow!
And he came up with the scratch players went on for 10 years. Actually, I think the last scratch players was played in 2010, and it was just too much work for one man. And it was actually embarrassingly, it was won by a guy who was actually a pro. Friends, nobody realised. But to help compile his field, because he started to get real traction, to help compile his field, he started compiling a ranking of his own. So he started the Scratch Players ranking in 2003, and it really developed and eventually took over his life. It was a brilliantly accurate ranking, Jim, and it was used a lot. It certainly, and well, I think the USGA adopted WAGR in officially 2011, 2012. But for that period, up until then, the Scratch Players was, if I was running the Sunny Hannah or the North and South, obviously you had other criteria, but the Scratch Players ranking had a real traction, which is a real a tribute to Fred's work. I mean, people actually discovered that he was very, very good at ranking amateur golfers, which, when you think about it, from around the world, I mean, it was the first truly global ranking. Obviously, it didn't have a women's ranking. It was just purely a men's ranking. But it really did quickly gain a great reputation and helped a lot of the tournament organizers compile fields. And it was used right through to the very end. But obviously, I think Fred's idea was that the USGA would one day take over the Scratch Players, but that kind of dream died when the USGA, as they obviously would have done, aligned with the R&A and adopted WAGR, which you and I have our opinion of WAGR now, but you've no idea how bad it was back then, Jim. It was not great. So if I'm running an elite amateur event in the US, back then I was using Scratch Players. Amazing. Again, the circumstances of Fred doing it, I mean, he did it on his own. He had a room in his house in Pacific Heights in San Francisco. Went in there, got up at 4 a.m, started compiling. He started trawling the internet, trying to find results from amateur golf tournaments around the world. Started at 4 a.m, left his office 12 hours later, 12 hours and 125 cigarettes later. But he trawled the internet, and what happened eventually, it became so good and so accurate because he actually had an astonishing calendar. He compiled his calendar of amateur events from around the world. Absolutely fantastic, unmatched. So if you wanted to know who won the 2015 Philippines Open, guess what? Fred would have the results to hand, and it would have been included in the scratch players. Just a maniacal pursuit by one man, and I guess the hope was that the USGA would take it over and give him the recognition
right.
that he felt he deserved. And he probably did deserve, but that didn't come, and that began, a decade-long war between the scratch players and WAGR.
It's funny because even today, I know it's not used because obviously he passed away and it's not being actively updated. But even on some of these tournament websites, they don't get updated that often. Like you'll see the scratch players, logo or whatever on the website as one of the criteria. So I think it's his legacy, his lasting legacy, is definitely remained. I think that you and I were talking about it, just like his encyclopedia of his brain and just how he was able to manage this. Like, honestly, he's sort of a man after my own heart, like trying to take the golf institution down and, through numbers crunching and through analytics. Yeah. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of like golf course rankings, which we don't want to necessarily go down that rabbit hole, but like the credibility of the rankings is like, are there any head scratchers on the list? And if there more than a couple, then you lose all credibility. Right.
You're absolutely. I was looking today, just before we come on, I was looking at the European Golf Association rankings, and it's a complete head scratcher. Charlie Croker is on the under 18 rankings for the EGA. Charlie Croker went to college, played on the PGA Tour Americas last year. I mean, stuff like that. Yeah. Max Kennedy's number 2. Well, Max Kennedy's turned pro. You could go on and that kind of stuff really does undermine the credibility. One thing I should say that viewed from afar, I looked at the scratch players and thought there must be something. This is so accurate. This must be an incredible mathematical algorithm behind all that, and there really wasn't. Such that there was no maths at all. There was an Excel spreadsheet, and such was Fred's knowledge of tournaments and players that he could look at a leaderboard or a tournament result and instinctively know what that field how many points should be assigned to that tournament given the strength of field, and how many points the winner should get. Because unlike say WAGR, you win an event, you get X number of points. With Fred's ranking, if you won an event by 15 shots, you got extra points because Fred valued that a runaway win as a bigger achievement than just a win. For instance, I'll give Dominic Clemens, who's transferred to Alabama, won the Scottish Amateur at Muirfield last year by 17 shots. He shot 62 at Muirfield in a 3-club wind in the afternoon after shooting 65 in the morning. Now, if that result had come across Fred's desk, Clemens would have been awarded a far greater points value than he eventually got from WAGR, because WAGR just looked at the result, looked at the strength of field. So stuff like that. And Fred was very good at keeping track of guys who were no longer amateurs. So you would never find, like Will Hopkins, I think, is still on WAGR right now. Will Hopkins won the Lytham Trophy last year. He actually got his Challenge Tour card. So to all intents and purposes, Will Hopkins is now a professional. Right. Yeah, he's still on WAGR. Stuff like that. Fred would never allow that kind of stuff to happen. It was, as I say, maniacal pursuit of perfection. There's other aspects to scratch that I, again, don't want to get in the woods, and you know a lot more about this than I. I was looking at a player the other day who hasn't played well in 8 months, and he's moved down. A top 20 player, hasn't played well in 8 months, has moved down one spot in WAGR. Simply because he played great a year ago, 18 months ago. With the scratch players, all results were removed after a year, and results started to diminish after 90 days, which I think is about right. Yeah, stuff like that. Instinctive stuff. But again, it was all in Fred's head. Just amazing.
Well, I think you said that he was trying to sort of sell it or have somebody take it over after maybe his health was declining or whatever. Yeah. But because it was all sort of in his brain, there wasn't anything there wasn't anything to transfer, right? Is that ultimately what happened?
That's right. Yeah, there's a friend of mine, well, not a friend now, but Matt from Arizona. He went up to visit Fred with a view to buying it, and he got there, and he was hugely a huge fan of the scratch players and a huge fan of Fred. But he got there and he kind of discovered there was nothing other than Stakhanovite hard work. It was just a grind every day.
Yeah.
So there really was it kind of lived and died with Fred, unfortunately. It's a real shame because it's a real loss. And, apart from anything else, I mean, now you're here to keep the USGA and the RNA and keep WAGR kind of honest. But before you, there was Fred.
Yeah.
That's all there really was. The problem with Fred was quite a confrontational person. So he kind of, I mean, I hate to say that because he's a real hero of mine, but he kind of rubbed people up the wrong way eventually, and they kind of just stopped listening to him, which was a real shame because he had so much to offer. Anyway, It's a great, I mean, not to sell the magazine, but I will. It's a great tale of David versus Goliath, and typical McKellar subject, very esoteric, but very, very nerdy. But there's a human story as well.
No, I think let's transition to that because I think that's basically right in the wheelhouse of McKellar. Like these golf characters. I even think the name McKellar I think is really in tribute of a real golf character. So why don't we start there? Like, where did the name McKellar come from?
Right. Well, this is a credit to our mutual friend Tom Dunn. He came up with the name McKellar. It's in tribute to a guy called Alexander McKellar, who was the original golf nerd back in the 18th century. I can't remember the exact dates, but he ran a pub in Bruntsfield in Edinburgh. As everybody knows, that's where the first golf course was. The Bruntsfield Links. Well, hang on a minute. I better not. But Tom's better at history. Anyway, so McKellar ran a pub, but he was never there, and his wife was always looking for Alexander. And of course, the only way where she found him was he was always playing golf at Bruntsfield. So the original, as Tom brilliantly called him, the original golf nerd. So that's why it was named McKellar. We were searching around for a long time for a name. We thought about calling it Squirrel. When I think about it in retrospect, why would you call a magazine Squirrel? But anyway, we were kind of desperate. Golf Illustrated was taken. I think we were looking for Golf Illustrated. Somebody owned that. Some corporation owned that. So we couldn't have that. But McKellar was named after Alexander McKellar.
Yeah, that's great.
Actually, I love the title. It's a great title.
That's great. So title aside, forming a magazine, forming a publication, what was the genesis of that? Like the origin story? Like what niche were you trying to solve for this?
Well, this was before Golfer's Journal, which is it's a corporation, So, but there wasn't. You had Golf Digest, which was a weekly. You had Golf Week, so there was all these magazines in the space. So Golf Week would take care of the news. Golf Digest would be bit tour, bit of personal stories. Guy Yoakum did these amazing. And I don't know if you've ever.
Mm-hmm.
Did these amazing long reads with people. The World According to, Lee Trevino, astonishing stuff. So we kind of we decided. Well, we thought there was a space somewhere in the middle for stories that might not be like Golf Digest back then was never going to write about Fred Solomon. It was just too esoteric. But nevertheless, a great story. So we thought that there might be a space in them. I'm going to sound like some, corporate suit here. We thought there was a space in the market for something that was modest intent, but beautiful. Again, you described it earlier on. We wanted, I think it's 8x4. I think the size is. But anyway, it's something that you can slip in your briefcase or in your handbag if you're getting on a plane, and just the best writing, the best photography, or the best photography we could find, and the best illustrators we could find. I mean, I was a Guardian's golf correspondent for 10 years. Just at the tail end of the heyday of golf media, it was the Tiger era. My first Masters was 2005. The Tiger chip in on 16. That was my first Masters.
Wow.
People forget he bogeyed the next 2 holes, but I know it's Chris, what's his face? I want to see Chris McCarr.
DeMarco?
Chris DeMarco.
Yeah.
He could have beat him. So my generation of golf writers kind of all got phased out over the next 10, 15 years. And there's a lot of good golf writing talent around. And I thought, or we both thought, Tom and I both thought that, that's A, what a wasted resource. Let's use that resource. And B, we wanted to kind of pay people, properly. We thought these are very talented people. There's nowhere for them really to publish their work. So let's do that. And we wanted to, not insult them because, I get calls all the time or emails all the time. Can you write this? Some very grand publications, incidentally, and they want to pay you a pittance. But I didn't want to insult golf, or we didn't want to insult golfer, these great golf writers. So we wanted to pay writers. We wanted to give them a place for their work to be published, and and do it in a place that they would be proud to be published in. So that's really it. It's very. I'm not going to lie. We do 96-page issues. I think this is issue 8. I think our publication rate is about 1 every 9 months. It's hard because we have really high standards in editorial. And it's difficult finding writers, actually. It really is, especially young writers. I'd love to publish young writers, unknown writers. And I like nothing better. We got a solicitation from a 20-year-old, 22-year-old writer for this latest issue about a story I'd never heard of in Bandon Dunes. So happy to publish that. And so happy that somebody kind of thought that we'd be, we'll send an email to those old guys at McKellar, and so that's great. I kind of love that. I say it all the time. The two industries I've never known anything like. The two industries collapsing in such a short space of time are coal mining and journalism. It's completely decimate is not quite the word, but it's certainly a different world to when I first started in it. So that was really it. And it is hard, but it's such a satisfying when you commission something that's you think is going to be great, and then it comes in and it is great, and then when you get the magazine in your hands for the first time, it's a real thrill. So as I say, the new issue comes out this week. The cover story is by a guy, I don't know if you might have heard of this guy, Jim, called Andrew Cotter, a very, very famous British broadcaster. He took over from Peter Alice as the BBC's voice of golf. He got very famous during the COVID years. He did this commentary on his dogs. He's got 2 dogs called Olive and Mabel, and he's a YouTube sensations. If you haven't seen them, go and have a look on YouTube. Andrew Cotter with Olive and Mabel, and he's written a fantastic story about. Andrew was a great player, a really good elite amateur, and so he's written a story about falling back in love with golf in the company of his 2 dogs. We're big fans. I don't know what Jim, what your feelings on dogs and golf courses?
Oh, of course, yeah,
I'm a huge fan. Have you ever been to Sunningdale, for instance?
No, I haven't.
Oh my God, that's dog central. It's just fantastic. Whenever I see a dog on a golf course, I can't help but smile. And you go to Sunningdale, and it's just smiling all day because they love their dogs there.
Yeah, out of Ballyneal where I play, they're very dog friendly.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's great. Really that's awesome. But I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned.
Yeah,
because I think you said they come out occasionally, right? Yeah. But I think the magazine would be completely different in terms of the quality and the structure if you had these like firm deadlines. Like you'd have to cut corners or like make trade-offs that you aren't willing to make. So I think given like the quality, it's like the issue is going to go out when it's right.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And that's sort of like this promise and this guarantee to the readers and the subscribers of the magazine. Like, you know that you're going to get really interesting stories that aren't told anywhere else, like these characters in the game and really like the soul of the game.
That's right.
I don't know. Like I've subscribed to Golf Magazine for years. I don't anymore, but it was just almost comical, like how thin it was, and you just weren't getting anything out of it after a period of time. Like you said, these stories they wouldn't be told otherwise, and it's just great that McKellar has a place.
Yeah, you're dead right. Actually, doing a magazine. Actually, again, Tom has a long experience in magazines, so he is brilliant at doing this stuff. I couldn't put a magazine together if my life depended on it. I promise you. But I do. Having done it ourselves, I now feel sympathy for people who are putting together a golf magazine, a Golf Digest. It is not. It's not easy, and even Golf Digest, even Golf Magazine, Jim, has standards, believe it or not. So, as I say, yeah. So it is hard, but you are right. We put it out when we think it's ready. We don't. We would like to, because it would make us a bit more of a business, proposition. But right now, it's a labor of love, and what we eat what we kill. So we sell it in, we get the money, we then print it off, and then we sell some more. And as soon as money comes in, it just goes straight out to the writers. So it really is yeah. Tom and I thought we were going to be the new Condé Nast, but you just quickly discover that it doesn't quite work like that. But really happy, super proud of it. My goodness, it's a beautiful product, and something you can put on your, I think, not to get into a sales pitch, but sitting on the bookshelf, it's just fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And like you said, the size of it, I actually remember the first issue that came out. I was going on a golf trip to take my son to Colorado. Yeah, right there.
Rare.
I got it.
Very rare, actually.
They're sold out now, right?
Yeah. I think I was saying to Tom today, if you get any left, he said, I've got 5 and they're all mine. I think I've got about 15.
But just slip it in your backpack, your carry-on on the plane, and it's just like the perfect size to read for a couple of hours here and there, or like when you're winding down in the evening. It's just great. You just have a smile on your face, like reading these stories. So it was really cool. One maybe we can shift gears a little bit, because like one article I remember from the early days, and this I think translates directly to, we'll bring up Niall in a minute. Yeah. Is you wrote an article maybe in the second or third issue around just like the landscape of junior golf, like giving folks, maybe outside folks, just an inside look of just like crazy parents and what just observations.
Yeah, it was, I think it was called Adventures in Junior Golf. Yeah. Do you know what? Maybe I'm a crazy parent myself. I don't. Maybe we're both crazy parents, Jim. I don't know. Some people might think that we are.
But let me just. Your path and your sort of approach to this, I think, has been completely different. Right. And, your son was in the U.S. Amateur this past fall. My son was there as well. And they were actually playing on the same courses the same day. I think Niall was teeing off like an hour and a half beforehand. And this is a perfect illustration, because I think I've heard you say, and even in this article, you take him to these tournaments and you don't watch him play. Which is completely foreign. I can't even like fathom that. There's probably listeners that are like, "Wait, that doesn't make any sense." So this is absolutely true, because I went. Joseph's here. We dropped Luke and Joseph off at Chaska, and I knew your son had teed off like an hour and a half before. So we were there, early or whatever. So I'm like, well, I'm not gonna go watch Luke hit balls. I'm gonna go track you down. So I'm like, okay, I figure, okay, so Niall's teeing off. He's probably on the back 9. So I start walking an 18 backwards, figuring that I will eventually catch up to him, meet you, we could chat. And basically by the time he finishes, be basically the time that Luke would be teeing off. So Chaska, these holes are just like, they're just separated. It's a huge walk. So, so I make this backtrack to like the 15th hole. And then I catch, actually it was 16, I catch Niall on the tee. But this seemed like it was at least like 2.5 miles from the golf course. And you were like, we had never met. So I was like, okay, is that Niall's dad? I'm looking at all the parents, try to find you. I watch him play this hole. I get up to a green. I actually said to a gentleman, like, are you Lawrence? And he's like, no. But in any case, you were nowhere to be found. Yeah. So I watched him play that hole, and then I had to skedaddle back. And then I texted you. You're like, "Yeah, I'm over at Hazeltine watching like Jackson Coyvin play or something like that." So.
Yeah, that's why I like to fashion myself as a bit of an expert on all these players. I'm not, obviously, but because if Niall's playing, I will go and I'll go and watch other players. I love. I mean, I've written about this as well. I just love watching golf. I love elite. I especially love amateur
Right.
watching elite amateurs. Partly because I spent a large portion of my life watching pros from the side. As a journalist, you're very privileged to be inside the ropes, but you're off to the side. You're still off to the side. There's nothing worse than the spectator experience at a PGA Tour event. But at the amateur game at college, the college game, you can be 10 yards away and you can watch the flight of the ball and you can see if the ball does what the player wants it to do. And it's such such an elevated experience. So I use that. I use these occasions to go and do that. The reason I don't do, it's just too much for me. I couldn't, I don't want to live and die. I mean, it's parental instinct. You want the very best for your kids. You want your kid. You don't want to see your kid suffer or, So I don't want to do that. And also, I coached Niall for many years in other sports, baseball, lacrosse, soccer. I've now played everything in high school and before. And, I didn't want him to be out in the golf course hitting a shot and his first instinct is to turn around and see what my reaction is.
Yeah.
I think
and you see that for sure.
Yeah, it's really, really destructive. And I think the experience, I'm not a paragon, I tell you that. But I think the experience belongs to the player. And I think, if I'm not there, that's then he takes ownership of it. It's really really cool. Actually, the he played in the qualifier for the US Am. His mum, Maggie, his sainted mum, pulled the trolley. But I was in Bend, Oregon. I was in town at the coffee shop or something. There was nobody good to watch apart from that. No, that's not true. And I get the call to bring the umbrella. The umbrella's in the car, and I get back to and they're coming down the 9th fairway, making the turn. I gave them the umbrella and didn't even look. I don't even look at live scoring. I'm just getting the habit of not looking at live scoring simply because
you are a saint. That's tough to do.
Well, live scoring is the worst invention known to man. It really is because as soon as you look at the live scoring and you think, oh, my goodness, player X is doing great. Guess what happens at the next hole? I hate it. Actually, my friends are well-trained now. Never text me during a round. I don't want to know any scoring updates because, I've got, I might be writing or I've been, I'm working on a book just now. So, you just don't. Just leave it be. In fact, for the last semester at college, I didn't even know any. Didn't look at the scores at the end of any days. Just at the end of the tournament, now would give me a call. How did you get on?
Yeah.
So I think that certainly works well for me. It stops me fretting, and it stops him. He just gets on with it. He kind of takes ownership of it. I think it works really, really well. I mean, I'm not saying it's the way that anybody should do it, but
It works
certainly it's a way for people to do it. I don't know, Jim, how not how you could sit and watch and look and oh my goodness, it would just be.
Well, I actually don't watch him play that often. I mean,
all right, yeah.
The only thing that Joseph can attest this. I have this God-given talent to find golf balls. So I feel like I have.
Yeah, that's true.
I feel like I have this gift that I need to give not only to my son, but to like the group. Like I've been in tournaments where there's like another group playing down the other fairway and they're looking for a ball and I go over there and I'm able to find it. So I don't know.
I actually in the past I have done that, but it's always been.
Yeah.
I remember following Niall at the British Boys at Royal St. George's years ago, and I would be like, I'd be way down the fairway, watch the tee ball. If it was findable, I'd just walk on to the next hole, stuff like that. But the higher up you go, Jim, in these tournaments, there's more. The more people there are around. There's spotters at the US Amateur. There's spotters at the.
I don't trust him.
At the well, there you go. But you know what? You being a stats guy, I'm sure it makes a difference over the year. You might save 5 or 6 shots.
Well, there's honestly nothing more demoralizing than the walk back to the tee for any kid. Like you don't want to see any kid have to do that.
Yeah.
So I the one thing that really irks me is when other parents aren't looking for every kid's ball. Because they're thinking, oh, this is my chance to get a little bit of an advantage. Like that's That's just not what the game's about.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is, and yeah, in fact, I mentioned the British boys. There was one day now I was playing a kids who shall remain nameless, and I remember looking for his ball, but it's hard sometimes, Jim, especially match play.
Yeah.
It's but yeah, so that's the way. That's the way. I'm just saying. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it's the way that kind of works for us. So,
Well, it's hard to argue with the results. The other thing that I wanted to touch on, which I think is really interesting with your son's background. I mean, given that you're from Scotland,
yeah,
and you've had him play internationally, so he really didn't go through the normal U.S. AJGA, any of that, right? His summers are out playing all over the place, and I know he was just in Australia. Like that had to have really helped in his golf development. So maybe we just explore that a little bit in terms, because maybe people are looking at the tournament schedule this summer, and you've got opportunities overseas that could really be really rewarding experiences.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Firstly, I should say we're very fortunate that we can do it. We're kind of privileged that we are able to take on a lot of it. So I do understand that that's not possible for everybody. So I'll put that out there before we go into it. Yeah, the as I said before, now was didn't really take up golf properly until COVID. There was nothing else to do. He played he obviously played. He played occasional events. Actually, he would always here in Northern California. He'd go and play in the GGA&C and the Northern California Golf Association Junior Tour, where he used to get his ass beaten, handed to him very, very regular by Jackson Coyvan and Ian Gilligan. And well, remember him going out one day and playing with Ian Gilligan, and I pick him up at the end, and I say, "How did it go?" And he said, "Oh, he beat me by 2. I should have hammered him." I was like, "Yeah, sure not." The anyway, so it was a really strong junior golf. I mean, to imagine that 2 kids came out. Well, Ian's a little bit older than Jackson. I think he's 2 years older.
Right.
He's a senior too. Yeah. But 2 kids of that quality, contemporaries, in the tiny little corner of Northern California is quite amazing. Actually, speaking of going and watching other players, I well remember an NCGA junior event at Poppy Hills, the final day, Coyvan and Gilligan going head to head. That was, I watched the last couple of holes. That was, I think Jackson shot 63 to Ian's 65 or something. You're talking about 2 14, 15-year-old kids. I mean, these guys can play. They were destined for where they've gone, and good luck to them both. They're really super kids.
Yeah.
So COVID, and then now really got interested. So the first summer after COVID, we just thought, you know what? Why not? So we kind of looked up the schedule. We had family back in Scotland, and we found a bunch of events in really amazing venues.
Right.
So again, I'll get into trouble here, but now played one AGGA event in his entire life, and it was because it was less than 50 miles from our house. We just decided we're not going into that world. It's for all sorts of reasons. One of them being that now wasn't good enough, but we'll leave that to one side. So we decided to go one summer. We went. He started off at the Scottish boys, under 16 boys at Dumfriesson County Golf Course. And then we went, played the Scottish boy. He played the Scottish boys. He played the St. Andrews boys. There's a whole host of events. Mm-hmm. So you can go play the St. Andrews boys. The entry fee, I mean, in contrast, the week that now played in the St. Andrews boys, in St. Andrews, there was an AGG event on somewhere. And the entry fee would be $295. Now I was playing in the St. Andrews boys for £30, which is $40.
Yeah.
So the St. Andrews boys is a qualifying round on the Eden course, then match play on the Eden course every day, and then the semi-finals and the final of the St. Andrews boys is held on the Oak course.
Oh, amazing!
Now, and for £30, quite amazing. And what you can if you can work on a budget. So we would just we rented a car, loaded the stuff in the car, and just drove around the country for 6 weeks, playing. Now we're going to play, Scottish under 16s, the Scottish boys, the British boys, or the amateur boys championship. St Andrews boys. Been just wonderful experience, wonderful bonding family experience. So that's firstly an amazing experience, a bonding family experience. You get to see places you'd never been before. I'd never been to Dumfries. I'm not sure I'd go back, but but you discover amazing golf courses that you've never
Right.
really, Dumfries and County. It's a really quirky little golf course, but you can the most club you can hit off the first tee is a 6-iron. So you're not allowed to hit any more than a 6-iron. Championship golf, but just a wonderful family experience and great golf and great for development. I'm really always been very interested in development, any kind of athletic development, and so we live in Northern California, and to spend the summer over there playing, St Andrews. The first British boys that he played in was at Royal Cinque Ports, one of the top three,
Wow.
in my opinion, one of the top 3 golf courses in the world. And that came at the end of I'll never forget this. It was just, this memory will live with us forever. So it's 2 rounds of stroke play. And that is a tough golf course for if you're a kid. Now I was only, I think he just turned 16. Jack Bigham actually won it.
Hmm.
Jack Bigham won that British Boys. The British Boys entry fee was £70. Practice round at Royal Cinque Ports, 2 rounds of stroke play. So you're already 3 rounds deep at Royal Cinque Ports for £70.
I'm sold.
I'm sold. You
Yeah.
should be. And then match play. And Niall actually got all the way to the semi-final.
I remember, yeah.
We couldn't believe it. I mean, literally, it just off the boat from Northern California. And everybody's saying, who is this kid? It was just quite extraordinary. But to get back to my story, after the stroke play, he was 10 over after the stroke play. And I'll never forget, you couldn't believe it. Driving back to London, to our friend's house in London, he's rolled in a ball in the back of the car, howling at missing the match play by a shot. And we're halfway back to London, and we get a call from a friend of ours called Colin Booth, the father of David Booth, who was a great player at Stanford. And Colin said, "Where are you?" I said, "We're driving back to London." He said, "You better turn back." And in the last hour, I think Niall went up about 25 spots because the weather had turned really nasty. So we turned back, had to get an Airbnb, and lo and behold, he made it to this. I mean, I think he got through 3 or 4 rounds of match play. So, I mean, talk about memories that will live with the family forever. We will never. So just wonderful chance stuff like that. And also the added bonus, I mean, you play Royal Cinque Ports for 7 or 8 times of the week, and it's £10 a round. These are world-class golf courses. Again, not to bang on about the AGGA or whatever, but, you can go play the AGGA on a very mediocre golf course, and it costs you $350, whatever the entry fee is.
Yeah, you have to get really to the invitational level before the courses get really good.
Yeah, but even at that level, Jim, they're not Royal Cinque Ports. They just aren't.
I think even beyond that, you mentioned golf development.
Yeah,
I think of like a number of golf professionals, like they play in maybe their first Open Championship. And then you hear in the broadcast is like, well, this is the first time they've ever been to Scotland, and I think just from we talk about the roots of the game and the rub of the green and the shot making and the conditions. I think if you're trying to turn into a well-rounded golfer, like it seems like that's really what you would get out of it. It's just seeing golf in all these different forms and just knowing at the end of the day, the goal is just to get the ball in the hole.
That's right.
And it's just completely different. It's just a completely different experience. And I think like he had to have developed faster and quicker having gone through that route versus he had gone through the traditional route.
Yeah, hugely. If he had just stayed here, he would have just been a high ball hitter. And, again, I'm not saying he's a great player or anything, but the lessons that he has learned playing, he's gone back for the last 3 summers now. And the lessons he's learned, I think, will last him a lifetime if he continues to develop in golf and maybe try and have a go at the pros. He's going to be much more rounded. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's probably the case that he wasn't rounded because he spent most of his competitive golf time over in Europe. He had a pretty awful fall season as a freshman. probably because he didn't play a lot of competitive golf in the United States. All his competitive golf was in the UK, was in Ireland, was in Europe, was in Australia. So he came to college golf and just didn't have the capability of playing the kind of golf that's required. But you are right. Over in the long term, I would say if to any family, I've been haranguing you for years. To go and experience it, because it's an amazing opportunity for development. If you're playing a 30-mile-an-hour wind at Royal Singapore, you're going to have to be able to, hit the middle of the club face, or you're shooting 10 over par in stroke play. Sorry. And now, Jim, the level that Niall's at, going back. So this past summer, it's over for the Links Trophy, straight into the European Amateur, straight into Open qualifying. Then there's a bunch of team events. Then there's, you can go there and have a short, sharp burst, and there's lots and lots of opportunities. Especially now, I mean, if you look at Tommy Morrison won the European Amateur in Denmark, that was him into a major. Callum Scott, they ran a point system between the Links Trophy, the European Amateur, and the Amateur Championship. The guy who won the most WAGR points and combined out the three events, he got an invite to the Open. That's how Callum Scott played in the Open and won the silver medal at Royal Troon this past summer. So lots and lots of opportunities. And of course, if you win the Amateur Championship, you're invited to the Masters.
Right.
So again, if you're an elite golfer and you have the opportunity and the imagination. This year I did see more Americans. This year, Australians and South Africans always come over. Crystal Lamprecht won the amateur a couple of years ago, which catapulted him into all. He was a good player, obviously, but catapulted him into all sorts of places. And I did notice. I mean, Preston Summerhays was over. He was in the playoff actually with Morrison at the European Amateur. So the amateur. I mean, again this year the Amateur Championship. Actually, before I forget, the Links trophies are kind of gets overlooked, but that's St Andrews, 36 holes, 18 on the Jubilee, fantastic golf course, 18 on the Old, practice round at the Old, last two rounds. It's a 72-hole event. Last two rounds are on the Old, so do the economics. 4 rounds of golf, guaranteed times on the Old course, for under £100. You try and get a guaranteed time, Jim. I mean, these are the economics. I'm from Scotland. I understand cheapness. The economics of that. I mean, you get a guaranteed. You can find a guaranteed tee time on the O course, but it's going to cost you in the thousands. If Luke, for instance, enters the Links Trophy, he's playing the O course 4 times because I'm sure he's going to make the cut.
I don't care about Luke. I want to get myself WAGR ranks.
Well, there you go.
Got me sold.
Actually, the cutoff on WAGR last year for the Links Trophy was, I think it was about 700. So can you get down to 700 between now and April?
I don't know how I'd ever earn 6.5 points in any event, amateur event, but
don't get me started on that as well. But just to kind of round up on this general subject, it's just I can't recommend it enough. Again, back to last summer, the golf course was pretty awful. Actually, the Scandinavian. I feel terrible saying that. I withdraw that. The golf course was interesting. It was very American.
Interestingly terrible.
No. Produced a great leaderboard. Fantastic leaderboard. I think it was Summerhays, Max Kennedy, and Tommy Morrison in a playoff. That is stout.
Wow.
You'd have to say that's stout. But now we play golf during the day. Pick them up afterwards, and we drive 50 minutes into Copenhagen. Walk around the middle Copenhagen on a summer's night. You can't beat it. Get on a bike, cycle to the nicest ice cream shop in town, and just again, wonderful life experience with golf attached. What could be better? It's can't recommend it.
And even I think that experience where he made it to the semifinals, like that opened doors for him, right? And I don't know what he is he on like some Scottish national
Yeah, he
team
is.
as a result of that? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, nobody. I grew up in Scotland, so people, but not at the elite golf level. I didn't, I wasn't. That wasn't the circles that I lived in. So when Niall went, people didn't know who is this kid.
They
Why
probably
is he?
recognized his last name, right? If anything.
Well,
Like, oh,
yeah, probably, and steered clear. I had as a journalist, I had a long running feud, might be too strong a word, with the RNA specifically over women membership of the RNA, which is a big issue back in the day. And being at the Guardian, that was right in our wheelhouse.
Right.
So things weren't great between myself and the RNA. But yeah, that did catapult Niall into, which he loves. I mean, he absolutely loves. It was, he got selected the following year for a small match, a quadrangle match in April in Wales, Scotland, Holland, Ireland, and Wales. 4 teams in April at school. No, didn't demand, but my goodness, it was the proudest. He was so proud. So we had to hightail it to Wales in April. But again, drop him off. Again, you'll experience this, dropping him off with the team, the coaches, and you just leave him. And we left him. He went off on his own, and we went to Bristol. Spent a week, 2 or 3 days in Bristol. Again, another fantastic city.
Mm-hmm. I've been there.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. So yeah, it really did, and that's been a huge part of his life. He's very proud of his Scottish roots and very proud to play for Scotland. It's a big deal for him. He would walk across hot coals to do it.
So maybe this is the right place to transition this. I have to believe that your son has to have like September 6th and 7th circled on his calendar, especially being from Northern California.
Yes.
Yeah, the WAGR Cup coming to Cypress Point.
Yeah.
And I have obviously followed the US team and the practice squad and all that sort of stuff. Maybe, do you have any insight in terms of how this all comes together on the GB&I side?
Yeah, well, a lot of good players. I mean, traditionally it's been a struggle for GB&I over here. But this year, a couple of things. I don't have any particular insight, but a couple of things I do know. Well, we've got a captain, Dean Robertson, who is I knew Dean when I was covering the European Tour.
All right.
Dean's won on the European Tour. He's a golf coach at the University of Stirling, actually my hometown, Stirling, and has done an incredible job. The facilities at Stirling are non-existent. I mean, it's basically a scraggly little short game area and kind of goofy 9-hole pitch and putt. And Dean has developed two recent amateur champions. This year he had Lorna McClimate from Stirling University. Stirling played on the Curtis Cup team. Won her point on the Sunday. Amazing. He's just done a phenomenal job as a coach and a developer of young players. So there's that side. But he also brings in this professional side. So he's been a professional golfer on tour. So no stone is left unturned. So that's one thing I do know, that I'm not sure. Again, I have no experience of past WAGR Cups, other than as a spectator. But in terms of organisation and preparation, the GB&I team, it will be unsurpassed. It absolutely will. I do know, because I think it's been made public. I did note that the USA practice squad had their get together in Florida, which is kind of a bit odd. Not exactly replicating Cypress Point, although I guess it's all about team bonding. Well, anyway, the GB&I, they had a practice session at Cypress Point, which I thought that was kind of pretty interesting. And suggested to me that they're going to be prepared. And I have no insights on the team, obviously not. And Nav was one of the players at the practice squad. I tell you right now, he would not be, if the team was picked tonight, he would not be at the forefront of anybody's mind. But you know what? It's he's had that circle for 2 or 3 years. Do I have to be careful here? He did mention to me the 2 days that they spent at Cypress Point in the practice session was the greatest golf experience of his life. And he's a pretty taciturn little guy. He doesn't say very much, but he was. Oh my God! Can you imagine? Can you imagine playing a? Actually, I said they all said this the last time. Can you imagine playing a Walker Cup on the O course?
Yeah.
Can you imagine following that up? I've seen. Can you imagine playing a Walker Cup at Cypress Point? Oh my goodness! In terms of the team, looking at it, do you want me to make some predictions?
We had a US when the practice squad came up. We had you know Brentley Romine. We had Brentley on, and we talked about Joseph and I and Brentley. We all made our predictions for who would be on the US squad. Joseph actually already earned a point because he predicted that Blaze Brown would go pro. So he was right about that.
I have so Niall's not making this team, right? So he's off to the side. So I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. You can. I mean, Jack Bigham almost won the Jones Invitational.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
So, and actually, just briefly on Jack. So Jack won that British Boys, and Jack went. Nobody would probably remember, but I do. He went through the field like a dose of salts at the British Boys the year he won it. So when Niall got defeated on the 23rd hole at the semi-final, that was the first thing I said to him when I met him. I said, well, at least you don't have to play Jack Bigham over 36 holes. But then Jack actually, Riccardo Fantinelli, who's a good player at Princeton now, great kid, Riccardo, and he gave Jack a real game in the final, It was the first proper game that Jack got that week.
Wow.
So Jack Bigham will be on that team, you would have to say. Conor Graham will be on that team. He played in the last Walker, the youngest player to ever play in the Walker Cup. Although I did see speculation that he might lose that title to an American player. I'm not so sure. I think we'll see. Yeah, so there's, I think you can say, and Cameron Adam, who's a senior at Northwestern, great player. Won his first college event in the last semester. Won the Scottish men's amateur at Royal Darnock. That's proper golf. Really. So there's three. You would imagine Tyler Weaver will be on that team. Good player at Florida State. He had a good week at the Jones Invitational last week. So there's four. After that, I mean, permanent number. I couldn't. I mean, but right now I think you could pencil those. Oh, sorry, Dominic Clemens, absolutely. He's at Alabama now. Had a great run in the amateur championship last year. Lost in the final to Jacob Olesen.
Who would be the mid-am rep?
Interesting. Who's the Welsh guy from Florida?
Jonathan Bale.
Jonathan Bale. He might have a chance.
He did well in the Jones.
Yeah, he did. But again, it's 8 months away. I think. Again, I have no particular insight. Currently, the team selection is based on, I think the top 5 of WAGR have got to be automatically picked. I think that might change. I think there's a push to make the team selection more form-based. So for instance, last year we have something called the St. Andrews Trophy, which is the best of Europe versus the best of GB&I. And and that was picked from the first 5 guys, and that team was picked off WAGR, which is, I'm not sure that's the best way to select a team. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that. But there's 5 names. I think those guys can get their bags packed, and probably the next 5 are up for grabs. The mid-am, Bale would be a decent shout. A couple of Irish guys, Matt McLean, obviously, who won the US mid-am a couple of years ago. He's a good player. I can never pronounce the guy's first name. Caelan Rafferty, who's very highly ranked on WAGR. I think he's played in a. Did he play in the COVID Walker Cup? I think he did. Anyway, so there's a couple of mid-ams. So, and other than then after that, it's kind of up for grabs. There's a bunch of kids. I call them kids. They're not kids. But do you know what? I was very heartened as a GB&I supporter. I was extremely heartened by the performances at the Jones Invitational. That was that was their strongest effort for quite a while. So we'll see. So there you go. Clemens, Conor Graham, Cammy Adam, Tyler Weaver, Jack Bigham. There's 5.
Well, that's great that there is these handful of spots that are open, because like you said, it's going to be form leading up to, through the summer, leading up to the events. I honestly think, like, in the US side, you're going to have 6-7 guys competing probably for the last 2 spots, and it's going to be, it's going to be basically Western AM, US AM. Like, you better show out, in those events, because guys may be in to fall out, and vice versa. You may bust your way through, based on strong play at the right time.
Again, no particular insight, but I do get the sense that there's going to be a strong onus on guys. Again, I have no insight. However, a guy like Dean Robertson is not stupid. If you're nursing your WAGR to try and just sneak your way onto this team, he's going to spot. He'll spot that. I think the sense is that he wants guys out there playing. So if you get caught nursing your WAGR, that's a black mark. So you better get out there and play. If you're Welsh, you play in the Welsh men's closed. You play in the Irish men's closed. You play in the Scottish men's closed. You go and support your national championships. I don't think, if you don't, for good reason. I mean, Niall didn't play in the home internationals last year for Scotland because he qualified for the US Amateur. Actually, 3 Scots qualified. Callum Scott, Conor Graham, and Niall all played in the US Amateur. So they didn't play in the home internationals. But by goodness, you better, if you're picked, you better get along there and support your country.
Yeah,
which is great.
Yeah, that's great. The other interesting wrinkle is you've got a WAGR Cup coming out of the hinge, like right on the heels,
oh my goodness, right? Yeah.
So I wonder about some of these decisions of the rosters around, even the backups, right? Just sort of this one eye on this year and another eye on potentially like building towards this one that's going to be coming in the not too distant future as well.
Yeah. I did think I read somewhere that this year's, so I think the US have got a practice squad for this year, but I think the GB&I practice squad is part of it are the younger guys from Jack Leglise, which is a kind of junior version of the Walker Cup. It's the best boys from GB&I against the best boys from Europe. All the greats have played in the Jack Leglise.
Yeah.
Sergio, Victor, all of them. So those Jack Leglise kids are already being included in the 2025 preparations with a view to 2026. So it's those kind of touches that really makes me very optimistic that, as I say, winning an away, it's not quite as hard as it's to win an away Ryder Cup. But for GB&I to win over here would be such a feather. Anyway, it's
I don't know, man. You guys already own us in the Ryder Cup. We can't cede the Walker Cup too. Like, let us have the Walker Cup.
Do you know what I'm? Well, actually, when you think about it, that's quite a strong core. Those top 5 guys, and that's a pretty good team straight away. And then you'll have guys coming into form. Mm-hmm. That's I think it'll be a lot closer than people think.
Yeah, and the US team, a lot of the top amateurs right now. I mean, it really depends on, like you said, Koiven and Clanton, Ben James. Like, Ben James probably I would say, will be going back to college his senior year. Like, he's probably too far away from getting accelerated. But, some of these key decision points, and a lot of the other top amateurs are seniors, and, the incentives through PGA Tour U to get started at Korn Ferry or, on the PGA Tour, that they might be the most vulnerable they've ever been, because I think the top amateurs are more likely to be playing professionally by September.
Yeah. Good luck to Luke Clanton and Jackson, especially good because we're good friends with George and Megan. Really pull for Jackson. So I think he's playing next week on the PGA Tour. Am I giving something away there? I hope I'm not. So he's got to hurry up and get those 3 points. We don't want to be facing it. Although, having said that, George and I, when we were years ago, we'd have we'd have a laugh about now would play Jackson in the Walker Cup singles. That would be
how about
that? Would be a dream. As I say, Jackson's certainly a lot for the US team, but now is nowhere near. Certainly he'll have to play a lot better to make that GB&I team. But that would be super fun because I've got pictures of them as 10-year-olds just going out and having a game of golf. Great stuff. Golf is
Yeah.
fantastic for that. Well, you know that. I'm telling you something. Already.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Well, this has been a lot of fun, just chatting. But like, let's get back and plug McKellar. So how can folks get issue number 8?
They can go to mckellarmagazine.com/shop, and there it is. That's really it. As simple as that, Jim. As I say, I've not got the begging bowl out, but it is a labor. It is a labor of love, and the only guarantee I can give you is that it'll get delivered very quickly, and it's a beautiful, beautiful magazine. I guarantee if you buy issue 8, you'll go back and buy previous issues because the stories are timeless. They're all, I'm pulling stuff out here. Oh, anyway, you know what it's like, Jim. And if you're listening to this, watching this, then if you buy McKellar, you're supporting great golf writing. There you go.
Yeah, I can attest. It is definitely worth the money. I'm just really happy to support both you and Tom, and just like you said, great golf writing and just supporting the soul of the game and what makes the game great. For us golf sickos. So yeah, it's really cool. And look, we'll be rooting for Niall this summer and tracking his progress this year, and just maybe we'll see you at Cypress Point.
Well, maybe we'll see you at Royal St George's for the amateur championship. Get Joseph.
Give me
get
the
him
dates.
on that plane. Get him on the boat. I'm sure I can get him a cheap passage on a trawler across the ocean. I swear to goodness, look, could win the amateur and then go play in the Open. So, I mean, the Open at Portrush. My goodness, that would be something else.
That sounds awesome.
Then we would see how good a caddy Joseph is. Then we would see.
Yeah, we might have to get a local.
There you go.
All right, Lawrence, we really appreciate the time. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
Thanks for having me on, Jim. That was fantastic.
Yeah, take care. Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Tech. How you doing?
Hey, Jim. Yeah, man, everything's great.
So last time we talked about sort of the off season and some of the crummy conditions. One of the other things I want to talk about in this off season is maybe this is the time where people are making big kind of scale like swing changes, trying to prepare for the next year. Like maybe you have clients that are sort of in the same shoes, like coming to you like, hey, I need to work on this. I need to add this to my game. I think of one recent example, although his swing looks beautiful to me as it always has, is Rory McIlroy. So I think Rory McIlroy showed up, hadn't played in a while, shows up at his press conference. People were asking him questions about like what's going on, what you've been working on. And he said he's been working on these kind of wholesale big time swing changes. And the one thing that got a little bit of traction is he said he spent like 3 weeks hitting balls into a screen, but never watched the ball flight. Like he was more worried about the form work and not focused on where the ball was going, because he thought that somehow that would just unwind the work that he was trying to accomplish. So I wanted to get your take. Is there merit in sort of that thought process? Like, does that make sense what he's saying? And then also, like, what do you see as best practice, around somebody who wants to come and make a large scale swing change?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there are times in this schedule, this periodization schedule, that allow you, more room to do something like Rory was talking about. I mean, if you think, and we'll talk more about junior golf, but like if you think about the average junior, they're playing every 2 or 3 weeks throughout the entire year. And this time right now in December when we're recording this is really the time where you would have maybe like a month off. So then how do you decide if you really should be making a swing change? Well, with what we do with some of our better players, it's more statistically based. Like you just noticed that there is certain patterns or certain contact issues. It's not necessarily based on video, like, oh, you're too far across like Rory was. It really has to do with, I'm just not hitting it well enough, and I'm ready to make this change and I have the time. Because I would say that you do need a certain amount of time to have what I would call like trust training. Trust training would be like, I have made the change, but I can go play an event and feel like it's going to translate. I say all the time, I can change someone's swing in like 5 to 10 minutes and make it look the way that I want. But their ability to recreate that and then do that in the event, it's not going to happen in a day. It's not going to happen in a week. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 weeks. I don't tend to do this very often just because I see the players that I see enough to where I don't think their swings get so far off. And I've been coaching a lot of them since they were young, so I feel like their swing is pretty close to their blueprint. But if you're not in that case, or maybe you're going to a new coach, or you're just not happy with how you're hitting it, or you went to college and you're like, I don't hit it good enough, then yeah, this is the time of year to definitely be making swing changes. Now, let's go to Rory. What I don't really understand about Rory is the swing doesn't look any different. I mean, it looks the same. It's still weak face and across. And, I think the thing that is really frustrating about all those videos is that he's sitting there on the range saying what he's working on intellectually. Like, obviously, he's been on gears and he has his coach, and they are going over, well, of course, you get the club 2 in early, which steepens the hinge plane and it goes across. Okay. What you need to do is the club needs to be more outside, and needs to hinge flatter, and it needs to be lay off. So he does all these rehearsals and they look fine. And then as soon as he hits, it goes back to looking fair. I mean, on video, it looks almost the same. I'm sure on gears or some 3D system, it's like minuscule degrees different. But it's like, it tells me that he doesn't necessarily understand how to make form change. Like some of the kids, like there's some kids, they make the change. It looks totally different. Like I would argue his doesn't look that much different. The other thing that was a little alarming is that he didn't necessarily, that I heard, say like why he was doing it other than his right miss. But I don't see what he did is going to solve that. I think that telling players what is wrong with their swing intellectually is an absolute waste of time because it doesn't necessarily lead to change. I think there's a lot of people out there that it's almost like they're going to a conference for coaches and they're watching like case studies, and the coaches are learning what the players are learning what the coach would do. And it's like, I would have rather told Rory how to fix it without him having to have any knowledge of it. And he just fixes it and he doesn't even necessarily understand how, because that would have been better, in my opinion. And that's how more I operate. I don't really need them to understand it. I just need them to be able to do it.
Now you mentioned blueprint earlier. Like, do you have clients that are coming to you and they want them? They think they need to make some drastic change, and you're like basically talking them out of it. It's like, hey, what you have is close to good enough. Like, do you think people, maybe it's FOMO, or they see some other kid doing something really, really well, and they say, well, I need to look more like that. They're maybe focused on things that are outside their control.
Yeah, they watch stuff on Instagram. They'll watch, I'm not going to say who, they'll watch certain coaches and be like, well, do I need to look like this? Do I need to look like that? And so when you start solving problems based on cosmetic preference or just the way things look visually, and it has nothing to do with ball flight or contact, you're probably going down a useless road. That doesn't mean that sometimes it doesn't correlate and like it sometimes helps. But I as a coach learned a long time ago that the whole point of having a race car team is to make the car go faster. And the only purpose for me is to make my players play better, and it's not to make them look better. And that is how I originally, we talked a few weeks ago about why I was a bad coach. I originally started coaching people based on cosmetic preference. Make their swings look better, and the ball will go in a better spot. A great example would say, let's say I fix someone's backswing and it looks like Adam Scott, yet they're healing it. Like they literally are shanking it. And I keep working on their backswing. I would argue me working on their backswing has nothing to do with why they're healing it. They're probably healing it because of early extension in their tail or something like that. But what happens is we get so focused on what our swing looks like to where we don't really focus on the things that are actually the problems, to where you go on the first tee, or let's say you go play on a par 3, you're working on your backswing, you shank it, and then you go to the range and work on your backswing. It's like, well, that's not going to fix anything. So I would say don't make any changes unless it literally is out of fixing like consistent problems that you have.
Now, how about this, like his mindset where he's not watching the ball flight? Like, are you ever in the same shot, like same shape, or you're really truly working on this form? Do you ever like trying to tell players like, don't worry necessarily where this ball is going, because this sort of conviction that you're going down the right path you might give up like 20% of the way into the swing change if you weren't seeing magical results in the first 2 or 3 balls that you hit.
Yeah, anytime that you're doing form change, you need to have little to no consideration for where the ball's going for a period of time, not for like weeks and weeks and weeks. But in Rory's case, he said 3 weeks. I would say, I mean, I'm not comfortable with it in a session. If someone's in a 60-minute session and they're not hitting it better, I'm fairly uncomfortable leaving them in that. And part of that too is like if they leave and they're not doing it well with me, what's the likelihood that they're going to go do it well when they have no TrackMan, no video, and no coach to help them? Like most likely it's not going to be good. But when it comes to like, okay, so what would it look like to do good form work? Good form work would look like doing slow reps. I don't really like rehearsals. I see people do like these really, really great exaggerated rehearsals and then they hit the ball and it looks nothing like that. So one of my techniques is I tell people to get up to the ball, do your rehearsal, and then just swing down. And that's one of those examples where I don't care where the ball looks like. And anytime that I video that, it almost looks exactly how I want. But when they do those rehearsals off the ball, like those dry reps, and then they get up to the ball, it's like their brain can't translate what they were just doing. So instead, just get up to the ball, do your rehearsal, and then just swing down slowly. Because really what you're trying to do is connect this feeling that you have that is unique or new and be able to do that while actually having a live rep. And that's what Rory was talking about. Is I want to be able to do this and hit a ball and not have to see where it's going. The problem is maybe he didn't do enough video to see if it was right, or he kinesthetically never really understood what it felt like to do. That's the problem. Like I would have him stop doing those explanation rehearsals and actually just do that and then swing down. Do that and swing down. So I think it was more of a learning, maybe a learning environment or a learning issue. The only other thing I would say is training aids. Like you need to have training aids. I posted a couple of videos recently with like the tour striker ball. Instead of telling someone to have their elbows close together and to think about that and to shorten their backswing. Well, if I just use that one training aid, it solves both of those. You don't have to think. So I think the more that you can create an environment that forces it versus them having to think generally goes much, much further. And I don't think that has anything to do with like being a top player in the world. I bet there are many top players in the world that can't do form work, but they're just really, really good. And I have kids that are not very good, but they're very good at changing their swing. So it's not necessarily correlated that like good players can change their swing easily.
All right. One last question. I'm sure Rory McIlroy is a loyal listener to the Driven Golf podcast.
Love you, Roars.
Yeah. He's going on 10 plus years without a major. What if he listens to this podcast and say, all right, I'm firing my swing coach. I'm going to hire Andrew Lewis. You mentioned what he's trying to work on, what he's trying to do. What's your free 1-2 minute lesson? What would you do?
I mean, the main problem he has is that he hits the big right. I mean at the US Open on 18 he hit it left, but generally speaking he hits it too far right. The reason that happens is the club gets too far across, his hands get too deep, and he can't get the ball to start on line. And so I think what I'm trying to say is I understand why he's trying to do it. I just think the way he's trying to solve it through like intellectually understanding it better is not the way that I would do it. Or I would tell him, embrace that he was across the line when he destroyed all those guys, at the US Open and when he was winning majors. So you could also make the argument that he probably doesn't need to change it. And maybe there's some other solutions versus I just think it's such a low hanging fruit to be like, I got to change my backswing. Yeah, maybe, but maybe there is something else that we could do. I don't know. I haven't looked at his swing enough. I do agree that getting the club less across would make sense because the shaft would tip and the face would probably get back in front a little earlier to start it more left. I think one thing is I would tell him to start hitting more of a cut. If you actually see lately, he is hitting a little bit more of a cut off the tee. I think the worst, if someone is trying, if you're out there and you hit a draw, and you're tired of your swing being across the line at the top, you are fighting a losing battle. Anyone who hits a draw pretty much is across the line. And oh, by the way, his best buddy, Shane Lowry, could not be more across at the top. And he has how many? 2 majors?
1, yeah.
1 majors? Almost 1 this year. So I don't know. I'd probably tell him to hit a fade and just call it a day.
Or just like the mindset of trying to hit a fade. He basically would solve a lot of this.
If you hit a fade, he would take the club more out. It would be a flatter hinge plane. It'd be more laid off. Ball would start more left. I think that left ball that he hits, or that right ball would minimize. But That's just my 1,000 or 30,000 foot view without like being close to it. But I promise you, I could find a solution. It can't be that hard. I mean, but he did win like right after he did all that. So, I mean, the swing looked the same. So,
well, there you go, Rory. Just
Roars, love you. Hey, you're great. You're great, and but I definitely could help you.
So yeah, there's the plug, Rory. Just make sure he gets back to Texas every once in a while to work with the rest of his clients. We don't want him being on the road all the time.
Yeah.
All right.
That sounds good to me.
Appreciate the insights, Andrew.
All right. Bye, Jim.
The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.
Yeah. Modest in intent, beautiful in execution. Reinvent the game through every contribution. No one cutting corners, no corporate institution. Join us golf nuts for the purest revolution. Golf's untold tales, ink them with authority. Esoteric gems, deep cuts of the majority. Voices from the fringe, making them priority. McKellar flips the script, gorgeous categorically. Scribes get respect, every check's in alignment. Paid for their craft, no begging for assignment. 96-page brilliance, every word refinement. Golf soul on the page, beautiful and vibrant. Protectors of the game with the reckless abandon. Every word, every page, McKellar outstanding. No shortcuts taken, just how we planned it. McKellar by your side, a perfect golf companion. McKellar by your side, a perfect golf companion. Yo, Fred was a scholar, a tactician in action, mathematician with vision, split precision like a fraction. Insights and pack heights, a beacon in the blackness, stacking rankings in Excel, algorithmic in his passion. Data scavenger, battling WAGR over stat lines, calculation massive, accurate over global map lines. David versus Goliath, compliance defiant, never silent. One man, one riot, bucking bias in a giant. Strength to feel, he could feel it, wielded like a war axe. New in dominance, dictated more in his score grants. Fed on numbers, Fred thundered mental fortress. Lit the dark stellar marks for this Lawrence portrait. Protectors of the protectors of the game with the reckless abandon. Every word, every page, McKellar outstanding. Standing, no shortcuts taken, just how we planned it. McKellar by your side, a perfect golf companion. McKellar by your side, a perfect golf companion. Protectors of the game with the reckless abandon. Every word, every page, McKellar outstanding. No shortcuts taken, just how we planned it. McKellar by your side, a perfect golf companion.